Square Enix trademarked some stuff that potentially points to more Final Fantasy. Hey, Square might be doing some more Final Fantasy stuff, but I guess specifically this is stuff that is maybe a little more in the 7 universe here. But some of this seems like a reach, or one piece of this puzzle seems like a reach from Gamatsu here, who wrote about it.
Name of the treasure.
Is it the Ever Crisis part?
Ever Crisis, which so they trademark 3 things: Ever Crisis, the First Soldier, and the Shinra logo. Which I'm glad to see Square getting back into streaming. Shinra was an idea ahead of its time, and now clearly it's time to bring back Shinra.
I believe I have the business
James Milky on the front phone.
Yes, I was gonna say, I believe I still have the business card of someone who worked for Shinra Technologies.
Yes. So Ever Crisis shares a similar name to the 2004 mobile game before Crisis, Final Fantasy VII, and Crisis Core, of course.
So, how much you want to go down this rabbit hole?
Go ahead.
I saw it going around on Twitter.
Let's sell me on it.
Advent Children.
Okay.
Before Crisis, Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus, Ever Crisis.
You're saying it's a compilation of all the Final Fantasy VII related material?
Oh, the initials of all those games. It is AC through now EC, like going in order.
Oh.
And they are all Final Fantasy VII related projects. So, maybe.
No, that seems like, unless someone at Square has personally acknowledged, yes, this was something we were doing with the lettering on these things, that is people.
It would be very easy to retroactively do that. Like, it'd be very easy to look at those projects over time now and say, like, okay, let's just keep it going.
Yeah, we meant to do that the entire time.
Yeah, exactly. The Undertaker's undefeated.
I don't know. Like the frequency of the term crisis showing up in all the Final Fantasy VII shit seems pretty conspicuous to me. But,
sure. Yeah. I mean, that's probably what it is, because like, why wouldn't they? But also, like,
that's the bigger thing to me is like Final Fantasy VII Remake was fucking huge. So of course they are doubling down on a bunch of Final Fantasy VII related stuff.
Listen, there is a reason related to Final Fantasy VII Remake why Crisis Core is important and why they need to fold that in. The end of Final Fantasy VII Remake takes major stuff. I had to learn all this through a fucking wiki because I didn't play original Final Fantasy VII and original Crisis Core, and when certain characters show up in the last hour of that game, and I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? And I have to go to a Wikipedia to read it. It all became clear that they are suddenly going to tie in all of those other games into the remakes.
Right. Yeah. And then the First Soldier could potentially be a Sephiroth reference, and then Shinra is obviously Shinra. So,
or is it?
Oh shit!
Where's my Dr. Hojo spin-off game? That's what I'm looking for. Biggest creep in the world. Yeah, Dr. Hojo's Candy Crush.
The big thing for me is it just seems very corporate to realize that they struck gold with that remake and just be like, all right, we got to keep this thing going. Let's start greenlighting, adjacent projects left and right.
Yeah, totally. But also, like, they've got to finish the actual remake. So, like, the idea that like they're gonna both. Well, but also finishing the remake means something different now than it maybe did before that game came out. So maybe those are the next chapters in the Final Fantasy. That's
kind of what I expect there to be something called Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 or whatever, probably some crazier subtitle to that, but also these side games that directly tie into that.
Oh no, we're going through the Kingdom Hearts model.
Jan, it's Nomura. You know he's got to do it to us.
Yeah, but I really like the 7 Remake.
Hey, a lot of people really like Kingdom Hearts.
I do that,
but they're not. They don't count. They're monsters. They're bad people. Or do you end up in a situation where like you can't just call this, like, it would be boring to call this game Final Fantasy Remake Part 2, and also
these are subtitles.
7R2. So maybe you end up with like Final Fantasy 7 : Ever Crisis, and Final Fantasy 7 : The First Soldier.
Right.
Yes, and then then your power company management game, Final Fantasy 7 : Shinra Electric Power Company, like a Factorio, but
yeah,
but you're Shinra.
Yes, SimCity Midgar edition.
Yeah.
Sim Midgar.
Why not?
Simgar? I don't know.
Okay. All right, let's go with that.